So, what if the most shocking headlines you see, like a rumored US plan to just take over Greenland, weren't just random crazy events? What if they were all carefully planned moves in a secret global strategy? Well, in this explainer, we're going to break down a pretty controversial theory that says all these dots connect and they all lead back to one thing: a massive, high-stakes war for the future of money itself. It all kicks off with this. It's a pretty wild claim from the source material that the US military was actually ordered to draft plans for a takeover of Greenland. And we're not talking about some friendly real estate deal here. The source frames this as a potential military operation. Honestly, it's an idea that sounds like it's from a completely different century.
And that's the first thing you think, right? Is this just old school imperialism making a comeback? Well, the analysis we're digging into says no. It argues this move isn't about grabbing territory at all. Instead, it's the opening move in a much, much bigger and mostly hidden global chess game.
See, from this point of view, the plan itself isn't even the main point. It's all about the reaction. The source material claims this whole story was designed to send European leaders into what it describes as a full-blown panic. The idea was to force their hand, to get them to the table and start thinking about what kind of deal they might have to make. And to kind of drive this point home, the analyses we're looking at even brings up a joke from comedian Jimmy Carr. He basically says that when a powerhouse like America makes an offer, a smaller country like Denmark doesn't really have a choice. Either you sell or they'll just take it. The source uses this joke not just as a laugh, but as a pretty blunt take on how things really work. Okay, so if it's not about the land, or rare earth minerals, or even a classic military base, what's really going on here? What's the actual prize? Well, according to this theory, the entire play, the provocation, the power move, all of it, boils down to protecting one single thing: the US dollar. And right here, this is the absolute heart of the whole argument. Every single move we're talking about, starting with that wild Greenland plan, is supposedly aimed at one single goal: defending the US dollar and its top dog status as the world's currency. Now, to really get why that's such a big deal, you have to understand this concept. For decades, the US dollar has been the world's reserve currency. That basically means it's the default money for global trade, which gives the United States a massive economic advantage. If that status gets threatened, the source argues, the entire US economy is in serious trouble. And look, according to this worldview, that threat is very, very real. It points to the BRICS nations, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and says they're actively working together to create alternatives to the dollar. It's framed as a direct, coordinated attack meant to shatter the dollar's hold on global trade. The analysis really leans on commentary from Glenn Beck, who interprets all these geopolitical moves as getting ready for a huge conflict. But not necessarily a hot war with soldiers and tanks, but a high-stakes currency war to decide which nation's money is going to run the world. All right, so if you believe you're heading into a global currency war, what's your strategy? What's your game plan? Well, according to the theory we're exploring, it means you have to radically rethink everything: your alliances, your entire approach to the world. Old friendships, suddenly they're not so guaranteed. And this is where we get to a really central idea in this worldview. From this point of view, alliances we've known for decades, like NATO, are now seen as basically useless. Europe itself is viewed as a continent that's collapsing, no longer a strong or reliable partner for the economic fight ahead. And you can really see the strategic pivot right here on this slide. It's about deliberately turning away from what the theory calls a collapsing Europe, and instead focusing on building a new power block right here in the Western Hemisphere, with countries like Argentina being seen as important new allies. Okay, so if you're ditching old allies and trying to make new ones, how do you enforce this new world order? How do you send a message to your rivals that you mean business? Well, the source points to a very specific and honestly pretty shocking story out of Venezuela as a prime example of this new type of power. So the source brings up this story from the New York Post that reads like something out of a movie. A tiny team of US troops, maybe 20 of them, supposedly go on a raid to grab Nicolas Maduro. But instead of a huge firefight, they allegedly use some kind of sonic weapon that just takes out hundreds of Venezuelan soldiers instantly. And the US team suffers 0 casualties. And the account cited in the source it's intense. This quote, which they say comes from a Venezuelan guard, is meant to show you just how terrifyingly effective this alleged new tech is. It describes a force so powerful it just leaves soldiers helpless on the ground. Now, according to this analysis, the raid itself wasn't even the main point. The real mission was to let the story leak. It was a calculated demonstration of power, a message sent loud and clear to global rivals like China and Russia, showing off a level of military tech that they just couldn't compete with. So all of this, the Greenland plan, the sonic weapon story, it's all building toward the theory's big justification for such an aggressive strategy. It's kind of like a reboot of a classic American foreign policy idea, but for a totally new, high-tech world. And this is the endgame. This is the whole point, according to the theory. The reason you show off this almost futuristic level of power is to avoid war in the first place. It's that old doctrine of peace through strength, but for the 21st century, you make the cost of even thinking about challenging you so impossibly high that nobody would ever dare try it. And so that really leaves us with the big, central question that this entire worldview brings up. The theory presents all these moves not as acts of aggression, but as a practical, maybe even necessary, path to peace. But in this global, high-stakes game, it really makes you ask, where exactly is the line between strength and aggression? And who gets to be the one to draw it?